Welcome to Chaos2Cured podcast. This is a special show. We have our very first guest, which is Jennifer Fraser, Ph.D. She is a wonderful advocate for really trying to end bullying. So this show is going to be about bullying, and we'll talk about Jennifer and talk all about the work she has done as well in a minute. We have definitely seen bullying take off in entirely different ways that are unexpected, and some of them are problematic. There's certainly stuff that we've talked about in our other shows, which are social media. There's been a lot of different things that we have spoken about. So, Jeffrey, just out of curiosity, we know we have increased access to technology. We have social changes happening all over the place, and we have lack of education and awareness. Are there some specific things that you're seeing that make you feel bullying is becoming more prevalent or less?
Definitely more. That's not even close. I think it's obviously always been there, but excuse me. But I know that my clients are people on the spectrum almost exclusively at this point. They're high functioning or middle functioning, and it's universal. It's something that I see so much, and it's obviously a different format. It's mostly at this point online, which is really devastating. But the kids I work with and the adults I work with too, they're all hypersensitive they're highly sensitive people. They think primarily in pictures. When they get upset, it's more intense than it is with neurotypicals. And I'll go back to Temple Grandin's great comment about autistic people have every sense that everyone else does, just more so, more of them. And so, there was a time when bullying was considered, I don't know, it was a little less vicious. It was always awful, but it was a little less vicious. And the thing that has made it so incredibly awful is the internet, social media, and it's killing people. You get these folks like people I work with who are, again, highly sensitive, really they question themselves. They have low self-esteem for many reasons, but I guess that's the reason they have low self-esteem is they've always been behind. They think in pictures, thinking in words is a second word. Thinking in words is a second language. They don't learn through drill and repetition. A lot of times in social situations, they're awkward, so they're considered prey, P-R-E-Y. And there are plenty of people out there who will consume their prey in a rather savage manner. And some of the stuff I've seen on the internet just blows me away, how cruel people can be. Teenagers in particular, and you take these folks and they sense somebody is weak or, just a little not real good with the response time and awkward in social situations. And of course, that's the attack. And these individuals already have low self-esteem. Just think about their entire life. Not all of them, obviously, but virtually like 75% of the people I work with did not do well in school early on, even though they're almost always bright. It's just the curriculum is just designed to ignore their strengths and capitalize on their weaknesses. I said that exactly the way I wanted to. And so they're vulnerable. And in an environment where you don't pay for your crimes, if you're somebody who is on the internet and is really berating someone and there's 3 or 4 other friends that are doing it, nothing's going to happen to you. There's no real protection. So there they go. They feel bad about their own lives. They feel shaky, makes them feel better to lower someone else so they relatively move up. It's bad. I'm hoping that it gets better because everything bad or everything good starts out really, really intense and then fades away and there's action, reaction. And I do sense a little bit more kindness lately, but it hit its peak, in my opinion, like 9 months or a year ago. I was just hearing it all over the place. So that's my take on it.
Well, and we have wonderful people like Dr. Jennifer Fraser, who wrote Teaching Bullies was the first book I read when I was introduced to her writing, and she has The Bullied Brain now, which is a new book. Jennifer, what are some of your thoughts? And again, please just share however you'd like to about this subject, because I know this is a big passion for you.
Yeah, I think that I really believe that the way that Jeffrey articulated the situation is very much in line with my understanding. It's just that instead of focusing on teenagers, my focus is on adults. So I look at adults like parents or teachers or coaches who role model bullying behaviors. We see it all over the place in the workplace. There's huge issues around workplace bullying. We see it in politics. You can turn, social media or the television on at any time of the day and read extensively about how people in positions of prestige and power in our world are just basically using very, very textbook bullying behaviors. And like Jeffrey says, there's really not a lot of social reaction to that. You do it with impunity, and the more powerful and prestigious you are, the less it seems that you have ramifications for maltreating others, even in a very public arena. So really, that's what I zero in on. And what I have found very interesting, and it started with Teaching Bullies, which came out in 2015. After that book came out, there was one chapter in it on neuroscience. And what I discovered that the brain scientists know about bullying behaviors and what it does to people and what it does to the perpetrator's brain, I just realized that it was incredibly important. It's not moving properly out of the laboratories and the research labs into the world that needs it. And so the Bullied Brain is all about the neuroscience. It's what the researchers know. And I just think it's critical reading. Like, it's mandatory reading for anybody who wants to have a healthy brain.
Well, one thing that Jeffrey and I have discussed, and I would absolutely agree. So if you are out there, and I love that as an educator, pick up the Bullied Brain, read through it. There's this needs to kind of happen at all levels, because we know from everything I have read that the bullying ends up having some pretty devastating effects long term. And are there some statistics that you have off the top of your head along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, one of the statistics that I often cite and I use at the beginning of the book, there's actually two statistics that I'll share with you. The first one that makes exactly your point, Kirk, is the idea that if you look at the prison population in California, for example, which is a massive prison population, there are 70%, so 70% of inmates, they were in foster care. So really what that tells me is we have jails full of people with neurological injuries who aren't getting the medical intervention or help or repair that they need. And I'm not trying to say that people aren't to be held accountable or responsible for their conduct. Obviously, when you're an adult, you have to be held accountable if you hurt other people. But what I am saying is that when you understand that children who are raised in abusive homes and land in the foster care system and are frequently abused in that system as well, and they end up in the prison system, it just shows we're really not doing a great job addressing the kinds of invisible injuries that these people have on their brains. And what's really important for everyone to understand is these injuries are invisible to the naked eye, but they are visible on brain scans. All forms of bullying and abuse, including those that don't touch the body, can do scarring, physical damage to the brain. It can be seen on a brain scan. So my big movement is to shift the whole conversation out of the realm of morality. It has its place in morality, but it also has a really important place in the medical. And I don't think we understand bullying as behavior that arises out of trauma. Oftentimes the perpetrator is not a healthy, happy individual with a healthy, happy brain, or, like, to go back to what Jeffrey was saying, or they wouldn't be behaving the way they are. I mean, it's very unnatural behavior. So we need to address that, and we need to change the way that we teach kids about it, basically. And then the other statistic I want to share is it really backs up what Jeffrey was saying, which is that unfortunately, we never have addressed bullying behaviors in a healthy, insightful, research, evidence-based way. And so it remains out of control in our society, and it's been far more enhanced by social media and the internet. And we have very lax legislation and rules around internet, which is really unfortunate. And so the statistic it's really startling, and I hope it doesn't upset too many people, but from 2000 to 2018 in the United States, youth suicide, so that's 10-year-olds to 24-year-olds, youth suicide has increased 57%.
Oh, wow.
And that's the era of the internet.
Yeah, I'm going to throw something in there too. You said exactly what I was going to say, is that one of the collateral damage of bullying, one of the many, is suicides.
Mm-hmm.
I remember just reading fairly recently with the Wall Street Journal, an article about number one cause of death amongst people under 25 is gun violence. Of course, this is the USA. And number two, suicide. And as someone who's been doing this kind of work now for 35 years, I can promise you the first 25 years, I didn't see no one. I mean, it was nothing. It happened, but it was the amount of people that killed themselves was infinitesimal compared to today. And what happens is you've got a bunch of people. I mean, this is my clientele, my tribe. They have hypersensitive. They're very hypersensitive to virtually everything. Everybody gets mad and everybody gets, has problems during the day. But the folks I work with, everything's to the third power, or at least squared. So it affects them even more than it would have, 15, 20 years ago. One of my hypotheses is that we're getting more and more right hemisphere dominant thinking, more reaction oriented, less analytical, less sequential. So we tend to live in the moment more. And if you take somebody who's got hyperactive senses and not real good self-esteem, and you get 7 or 8 people telling them that they're worthless and that they should kill themselves. And the other part of this is so hard, this is the main point, is nobody wants to tell their parents that they're being bullied. They don't want to because they're embarrassed. They figure something must be wrong with them. They must be a loser. And it's really, and they also don't want to bring it up because they don't want to relive it. In telling your parents about being bullied in school or online, you are going to relive the experience. And again, these are people who are very sensitive, and there are more of them now than they're used to. And they tend to live in the moment. They tend not to talk about their feelings because their feelings are so powerful, and they're afraid to relive it by talking about it. So I don't see that getting better. I think we really need to figure this stuff out. And I don't know, praise your kid if he or she tells you that there's a problem. Make it worth their while. Model that type behavior. I would just say, if my kid was being bullied and he talked to me about it, I would make his day. I would be so nice to him. I would treat him to stuff, buy him new running shoes, whatever it is he wanted, because you've got to talk about it first.
I agree. And, as you talk about how we need to take action, I really like, Jennifer, what you said, how you're trying to bring this into a place where it's medical. Because then if we study it, we know with neuroplasticity, the brain is adaptable. So we can help form and shape and sculpt our mind. But when it's, I already know there's things like physical health problems that people that are bullied go through. Definitely there's emotional trauma. And, I've spoken about this with you, Jennifer, before, as I was both a bully and acting out absolutely because I was not in a good place. And, a lot of times people will bully because, let's take a workplace setting, for example. If there's one person that doesn't fit in and they're just maybe not the right, I don't even want to say fit in because that's not the right way to say it. If they don't completely fit a specific mold of a company culture or a culture of a specific group. What happens is, you see a lot of people that are not prone to bullying others. They will join in because you get to choose. Are you the person that stands up and you protect the person being bullied, or and you face the wrath of a much larger group of people, or do you join in with them and hammer that individual? Unfortunately, from my experience and what I have seen, and what I deal with is across the board from childhood through adulthood, I see most humans taking the easiest path, which is to join in the group. Jennifer, are there some ways that you feel that we can not only bring it to the forefront, but some strategies that, whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, in a workplace, are there some things that you have seen that have been very successful in empowering individuals?
Yeah, well, the subtitle of my book is The Bullied Brain, but it's the subtitle that's really important, and it answers to your question, Kirk. And the subtitle is Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health. And so, I mean, if we start to look at this more as a neurological issue, or even to expand it more, like Jeffrey's talking about, like a neurodiversity issue, where we're understanding that when people behave in certain ways, that's how the brain interfaces or interacts with the world. And if the brain has a distortion or some kind of a threat, like you're saying, not fitting in, well, that not fitting in is one of the most dangerous things for the brain. The brain knows that it has to be part of community to survive. That's a very deep evolutionary understanding that the brain has. Human beings only survive by being in social groups. And so not to belong to the social group is actually very threatening to the brain, and it will start to do kind of desperate and aggressive acts to try and belong or to try and take someone else's place. If you start to think about how much human beings are creatures, we behave an awful lot like animals. And by studying animals, we can learn a lot about our behavior. So one of the things that I focus on in terms of like, what are strategies, what could we do, is so to draw on the research. I think it's very helpful for people to understand that when you are in an aggressive mode, or in a, even worse, a bullying mode, where you're not just like losing your temper and lashing out, that's always unfortunate and painful for yourself and for those that are on the receiving end. But if you're actually engaging in behavior where you're tracking down a target, you're trying to use that target as a way to mirror back power to yourself, you've gotten caught into this, distorted type of behavior that we refer to as bullying. One of the things is understanding. So if you're the witness to it, or the bystander to it, or the target, and none of that group is speaking up or pushing back, you need to understand that what you're doing is identifying with the aggressor. And if you identify with the aggressor, it's how you preserve yourself. It's actually a pretty smart strategy. So in the wild and in the human jungle that we all have to survive in and live in. So, when we say to kids, oh, be an upstander, that's a ridiculous thing to say to a child. Adults can't be upstanders because we know it's dangerous. Children know that if you put yourself in the path of the bullying individual or the group, you could well be getting ostracized or isolated or targeted in terrible ways. It's a very dangerous position to take, and yet we casually will say it to kids. But if you identify with the aggressor, then it's a self-protective mechanism. It's like what happens when children are being bullied by adults is they will put on blinders because it's a survival strategy. It's called being blind to betrayal. If you're being sexually abused by an adult, you put blinders on. Why? Because that's how your brain copes. Your brain cannot understand that a trusted adult who should care for you, who should put your best interests at heart, always going forward, and is an authority figure and is respected in the community, that person is also harming you. That's almost impossible for the brain to understand and compute. And if we go back to some of the things that Jeffrey was saying about how our brain is processing reality, are we analyzing it? Are we feeling it emotionally? Are we interpreting our reality through pictures? Are we using words? The brain's job is to make sense of reality. And when a child or a young adult is being abused by an adult, they can't make sense of reality. And that is oftentimes a pre-suicidal stage for a young person's brain that's not fully developed until 24, 25. So, I mean, we have, like, one of the things I really try and do in the book is debunk a whole bunch of myths that our society operates on because they don't look at the science. When you start looking at the science, you have kind of new respect for your brain, for how it copes, for people's brains who are using bullying behaviors to try and cope with probably a great deal of unhealth and malevolence in their own lives. Like, you just understand that the brain is this miraculous thing. And the more we learn how to work with it, the more we can take care of our own brain and the brains of others. So the whole key to all of it, Kirk, is neuroplasticity, as you just said. It's about the fact that we can change our brains. If we can change our brains, we can weaken them, and we can also make them a whole lot stronger and more high performing and more empathic and compassionate.
You know, there was one thing that you said that really hit me, because I have one individual in particular that I'm thinking of, and our show that will be coming out in the next week or two is all about the aching for friendship and relationships. And when you said how when we are part of that ostracized group, or we will do just about anything. And that's when oftentimes we get more bullied, because there are individuals, and I am deeply sorry for the way I used to be, but I would pick somebody and I could tell that they were already kind of beaten down. And when you can see that and you can sense that, and you're angry at the world too, it's very easy to lash out just so that you get a laugh, so you feel like you belong. And then at the same time, that poor individual that's being so massively harmed in multiple ways, it hits their confidence. I'm glad you're showing that, first of all, the brain, you can see it on images. I love that as information, because it's nice to see that when someone is bullied, we don't get to see any bruises. They come home and you can't tell. A lot of times, as Jeffrey said, your child is not going to talk about it. So they seem happy. There's a fake smile on. How was your day? It was wonderful. So those things are extremely painful, because you want your child, and you want, and even at work, how many people want to come home to their partner and say, I was severely bullied and I keep getting bullied? And it's something that we feel some shame for, and we shouldn't, because everyone has been bullied at some point. But I did really like, and I want to reiterate how you said, being able to see kind of through the eyes of the aggressor. For me, that was something that was very helpful as I started trying to relate to neurotypical individuals as I was going through my healing process, because I would get so angry or so upset. And as I grew more confident that I was okay, so why is this person saying something mean to me? It's not an objective truth. And once you can see from their eyesight and you go, oh, this person is actually in pain, they're lashing out because they hurt. First of all, Jennifer, thank you for the work that you do. It's something that is so important, and we need to have more information out there so we can figure out how to. I don't think there's a way to police the internet, but there are definitely ways that we can enhance and maybe help our children all the way through our adults understand themselves better, so that they have I guess more of a shield to this, so to speak. Jeffrey, I know you might have some thoughts on what she said, so I wanted to jump over to you really quickly too and see what you thought.
Well, the main thing, I mean, as you know, my specialty is working with people on the spectrum. And what I was struck with when Jennifer was, speaking, was that people on the spectrum have a wide range of outcomes. If they're treated well in a healthy environment, they can be incredibly successful, and a lot of times they are. However, if you abuse someone on the spectrum, they just shut down and go crawling inside and pay attention to nothing. So that, to me, is a tie-in here between bullying, massive increases in bullying, and massive increases in identifying autism. Because what you're doing is you're creating a world, an environment that's cruel, In some cases, it could almost be likened to a concentration camp or a POW camp for the poor people that are taking the abuse. And so what happens is, to protect themselves, and this is kind of what autism is, you crawl inside and you escape because you have the talent to go inside your own head, shut the world off, and create your own reality. Well, we're seeing so much more of that. And I think it correlates with bullying. That's my main contribution to this dialogue.
Well, I think that we could look at that on, sorry, Kirk, did you want to say something?
No, I was going to jump right to you.
I was just going to say that what I love about that is you've just described, Jeffrey, a coping mechanism that's very brain oriented and it's very animalistic. So think about 3 different types, just to generalize. Let's say we have 3 different types of individuals, and it's more complex than this, but this will, once I explain what I'm trying to say, you'll see what I mean. So you've got the bullying individual. Well, that's a person that processes trauma by going into fight mode. So their body pumps up full of adrenaline and cortisol. Their brain has interpreted their situation as highly threatening, very, very dangerous. So they're like a dog that starts to growl, it bares its teeth, it makes its tail go rigid, its fur stands on end, and it's communicating to you, one wrong move, and I'm going to go for your throat. That is the bullying individual. They will hurt you before you have the chance to even notice they're in pain, because that's their strategy. They're in fight mode, and it's a very deep brain reaction that's unconscious, you could argue. Now, the autistic individual, or the person on the spectrum, they have, like you say, they have, as Steve Stauberman says, they have superior brains. So they are able to retreat into freeze. You can call it, they're a kind of combination of flight and freeze, which are also just sympathetic stress responses that the brain is marshaling to get the person to safety. So like a rabbit will freeze if a predator's around, it just will not move a muscle. That's the idea of retreating into selfhood. Flight will be an animal that just runs like a deer as fast and quickly to get away from the slower predator. So all of those things, though, are the sympathetic stress response system that is part of our brain and body, and it happens without us even consciously thinking. It goes into hyperdrive depending on how much trauma and threat we've already had to cope with. And hence you'll have individuals in prison who are very, very violent. When you look at their brains, they will have enlarged amygdalas, for example, which is the threat response system in the brain. And so much of their brain resources, in order to keep them alive, has pumped them full of hypervigilance, because that's how they lived in their home. That's how they lived in their neighborhood, their school, etc. But what's really amazing is that you can take this automatic stress response system and you can learn, just as we were saying before, you can work with it and you can manage and control it. You don't have to be at the mercy of it like an animal is. You can start to train yourself by using, and this is everything that I say is grounded in extensive peer-reviewed, replicated, evidence-based neuroscientific studies. I'm not marshaling all the names and studies and that kind of thing, but you can just rest assured it's all in the book if you want to see the research. But what I'm saying is extensively documented in neuroscience just how much you can use, for example, aerobic fitness. Aerobic fitness does wonders for calming down the stress response system. You can use mindfulness. Mindfulness is remarkable for turning on the parasympathetic nervous system, and scientists refer to it as rest and digest. So when you've got a kid riddled with anxiety going into school and they tell you they have a stomach ache, and it goes back to how kids don't have language. We don't usually teach them enough language to know how to articulate the emotion concepts around bullying. For example, we've talked about shame. We've talked about not wanting to bring the trauma up again. Well, if we taught all of these things to kids starting in kindergarten when they go into institutionalized settings, it would help them and their teachers and their parents and coaches to have this ongoing dialogue, this rich vocabulary for all of these different brain behaviors that happen, that if we knew more about, we could be more empathic and compassionate and understand the medical of what's happening. You know, we don't take it out on a kid when they have a broken arm, but we take it out on them when they have a break in their brain. And that's just got to stop, because it's not fair. It's really, really destructive. Anyway, there's so much great research out there on things that we can proactively do to heal our brains, to repair our scars, to recover if we've been a victim.
Oh, beautifully said. There was one or two things there that hit me and surprised me. You think of the sympathetic nervous system, and you bring up cortisol, and if you just look at the level of stress we have in this world, we are more primed to take the easy way, which is going to be reaction instead of reflection. And a lot of times when I'm working with little ones that are struggling with being bullied, a lot of what I try to do is actually help them understand how amazing they are. Because once people reach a homeostasis of kind of understanding their own place in the universe, they go, listen, I'm good at this. I'm not great at this, but these things are absolute. These are truths. And once they see those truths and they know who they are, if somebody comes at them and says, oh, your hair looks horrible, or your breath stinks, or whatever they want to maybe tease them about, they can actually look at it through a different lens, which is they're going, that's not objectively true. It's just not. And that is, it's been one of the few things that I have found to help some of the young ones I've worked with. But mindfulness and, of course, exercise is one of my favorite things. And Jeffrey as well. We don't talk about it much, but Jeffrey is always hiking at 10,000 feet, and and he's more fit than most people in their 30s, which is just incredible. So it's something very, very vital. I really would suggest to anyone out there reading and purchasing The Bullied Brain, and please pass it around. Tell other people about it. It's a topic that, again, unfortunately, I've been the part of both sides, and a lot of times when I have felt the most bullied was not in school, but afterwards, when so many people were telling me what problems I had and giving me medications, and I just lost who I was. And so at that point in time, I felt I was getting bullied by doctors. I was getting bullied by teachers, by all of these other people who have qualifications. And there wasn't a lot I could say. If I didn't have the qualification, it was like I was just discounted. So I did deal with, and I know that happens in office settings. I know that happens all of the time with adults. And I'm so happy to have you as a guest, and really for the work that you do, because to me, bullying needs to find a way out. It shouldn't be something that people find as cool. It shouldn't be something that is popular. It should be seen as exactly as it is. It harms everyone. There's no winner when there's bullying. And I know, Jeffrey, are there a couple things that you would like to add just before we close out?
Yeah. It's really unfortunate that in politics now, bullying has become cool. And a lot of people mistake it for macho. And that is so damaging and so wrong. It goes back to something that you said, and that is bullying now has become cool because adults do it who hold prestigious positions, and that's really bad. And the other thing that needs to change, I hope it will. The other thing is bullying is just pure aggression. And I think that there's so much aggression now because there's so many people, so much discord, and when it's easy for one to feel, completely, like they have no power. And so if you bully someone, you don't have to actually make the world a better place or do anything, achieve anything. You move because other people move down, so you move relatively. So it's awful. And I don't see it getting better until some of our leaders begin to stop using that tactic, but it works. And as long as it works, people are going to use it, unfortunately. And that's my, my comments.
Jennifer, please go ahead and give some closing thoughts as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say in response to that, one of the things that I think we need to start teaching children, and then this goes across the board all the way up to adult populations, because we're now having such a textbook example on a very, very on an international political stage of bullying behaviors, and this concept that it's aligned with masculinity is really interesting to me. So you could look at Trump, but you could also look at Putin. You could look at some of the other dictators right now in the world who are fancy themselves strong men, and they like to ride on horses with their shirts off and stuff, as if somehow what makes them a man is abuse of other individuals. And this can be like a whole scale when you invade Ukraine, or it can be in more targeted ways when you try to take apart political opponents by humiliating them and mocking them. And what I find really interesting is that if you think, like when I talk about my book, I talk about how this new way of thinking about bullying, the best way to debunk a bunch of myths is with science. And I talk about the scientific revolution in the book. And I do believe that neuroscience is ushering in a scientific revolution. And people will say, oh, that's kind of melodramatic. And I'm like, well, I've lived through two in my lifetime. I'm middle-aged and I've lived through two scientific revolutions already. And one of them, Jeffrey, goes back to the point you're making, which is when I was growing up, we were all, we were brainwashed and messaged and marketed endlessly to believe that smoking cigarettes was the sign of independence, masculinity, and health. And so once again, you saw the strong man out on his horse alone. He didn't need anybody. He was that powerful. And that was the market. Yeah, exactly. So, and then us girls were constantly bombarded with images of Hollywood starlets like Audrey Hepburn smoking cigarettes. And it was to make you glamorous and sophisticated. Well, it was the greatest lie out there, because actually it didn't make you strong. Smoking made you weak, it made you sick, and it ultimately could potentially kill you because it was correlated with cancer. And we use non-invasive, innovative technology, namely the X-ray machine, to make this visible to people. It's like your brains are really, I mean, all of us, we're deeply visual creatures. Even people that aren't on the neurodiversity spectrum, we are visual creatures. And if we can't see something, we have a really hard time believing it. So you start putting brain images in front of people of brains that have been harmed by bullying and abuse, and you constantly make them see those images as much as they see the images of blackened lungs or cancer-filled faces and heads, like we have to see if we want to buy a package of cigarettes. Like if governments were doing this, they have the research, they have the knowledge, they should have done this a long time ago. They could have done this 20 years ago. You would start having people pause. You would not have people think that a politician or an international leader was actually powerful by putting other people down. You would see them as mentally ill. You would see them as suffering from distortion in their brains. And you would actually probably put them through some kind of a EEG test, because you would never have an individual with an unhealthy body running a country. Why would you have a person with an unhealthy brain running a country? And access to nuclear power. That doesn't make any sense. But we are not caught up with the science. So this is really, this is my big mission, is to get the science out into everybody's hands and for people to start making the decisions themselves, because the government is not doing it.
Oh, Jennifer, I don't want to add much at all, because that was beautifully said. I do know that it's very frustrating for a lot of people that are getting bullied, because you hop on to Twitter or Instagram, and if you want a lot of followers, you take a topic and you say something really extreme. There are not many people that are well known on social media or have big accounts that don't take pretty extreme stances. There's not a lot of people that are down the middle and just to the fact, or I guess you definitely don't see a lot of ones that are just kind. And that's where I do agree with you, Jennifer. I think we need to see it from a younger generation. And again, we have to lean on the younger ones to hope that they can improve this world. We're already doing that with climate. Now we're looking at emotions as well. But I like the thing you said the best. We have a hard time believing in something unless we can see it. So everyone out there, please check out the Bullied Brain. You can purchase that and search for it. I'm sure is it on Amazon and everywhere?
Yeah, it's everywhere, but it's on Amazon. And if you do get it on Amazon and you're inspired to write a review, it's super helpful to me. So thanks.
Yes, absolutely. And if you are around and if you have a child, or if you have a friend and they're looking a little harmed, talk to them, open up. And, I think if we all start building each other up instead of tearing each other down, and Jeffrey, you said that perfectly, where, a lot of people just grab somebody and it's easier for them to pull others down instead of doing something significant to lift themselves up. Mm-hmm. And I think we should all aim for that, because it's a much more fun way to live. Lifting others up is empowering, and it does something good. Kindness is a gift we can give all the time, and it never runs out. And honestly, unfortunately, we are in short supply. So we definitely need it. This was a beautiful talk. Thank you for being our very first guest. So Dr. Jennifer Fraser, everyone, The Bullied Brain, please check it out. And Jeffrey Freed, my co-host, thanks to you as well. We will be back next week. If anyone has any questions, certainly feel free to reach out, and have a beautiful week.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kirk.
Thank you so much for listening to Chaos2Cured podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with everyone you know. And definitely like, follow, and subscribe. Certainly leave a comment if you'd like. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about the next time. Also, in our show notes, there should be direct links where you can follow us on our social media, as well as reach out to us directly. Thanks again, and have a great day. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Chaos2Cured podcast are the speaker's own. All discussion is based on our own experiences. We do not and cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Chaos2Cured podcast cannot give medical or health advice. All discussion is based upon our personal experiences and meant for general and educational purposes. This podcast is not a substitute for professional help or for diagnostic purposes for yourself or another. Chaos2Cured podcast always encourages you to consult an appropriate professional.